everybody. I'm Carol McFarland. I'm a retired state representative from White Bear Lake, and I am one of the hosts of tonight's forum. And I'd also like to introduce the other hosts of tonight's forum. We have the Met Council with many people here, the U.S. Geological Survey, which we will call USGS the rest of tonight most likely. We have White Bear Lake Mayor Joe Emerson. Where are you, Joe? Okay. And we have Ramsey County Commissioner Victoria Reinhardt. And Met Council members Harry Melander, who's hiding over there, and Sandy Rummel. Where's Sandy? There she is, okay. And the White Bear Area Chamber of Commerce. And also a big thank you to the local cable TV for doing our coverage of tonight's event. And just a reminder to turn your volume down or turn your cell phones off if you would. They're going to be doing this on cable so that people can see the reruns for who knows how long. Hopefully you had a chance to visit the displays that were out here, and I wanted to thank the City of Burnsville, St. Paul Regional Water Services, Met Council, USGS, and DNR for their displays, and they will be here afterwards if you didn't get a chance to see them beforehand. Okay, before we go any further, I want to recognize any dignitaries, elected officials, appointed people from the area. And this includes water and soil conservation districts for those that aren't prepared. Okay, so if they could just stand up, and we're going to have you self-introduce, and you'll have to say it as loud as you can. We'll start at this side. That's you. Super. Doug?
Doug Mean, White Bear Lake City Council. Brian O'Lyle, White Bear Lake City Council.
David Richards, White Bear Lake City Council. Doug Skelton, State Senator. Barbara Wilson, State Representative.
Curtis, White Bear Township, Board Supervisor. Peter Fisher, Representative 43A. Happy Camp, White Bear Conservation.
Super. We have another conservation district member too. Yes. Super. We didn't miss anybody, did we? We didn't want to mispronounce names either, so we appreciate your self-introducing. So, information about tonight's meeting. This is an educational event. In order to explore potential solutions to the water supply challenges we face, we must first understand the issues. Tonight is not designed to be a debate. All of us, including the experts presenting tonight, need more information, and that's what we're here to do. Share information and continue to acquire knowledge about how we get where we are and how to proceed in a way that is deliberate and thoughtful. This is the second of 3 education forums, Our Water, Our Future. At our last event in April, we heard about the aquifers, what they are, where they are, and about what we do know and don't know about the relationship between groundwater and surface water. We heard that our current water use practices are not sustainable, that we need to change course if we want to retain the precious water resources we currently enjoy and that sustain us. Tonight we have representatives from the Lake Level Resolution Committee of the White Bear Lake Conservation District, the St. Paul Regional Water Services, United States Geological Survey, and the Metropolitan Council to discuss options for restoring the balance between water use and lake water levels. And as you signed on, you could have received an index card. If you haven't, we should pass some down in the rows. This is what you'll be able to write down some questions. You can either drop them off at the end of the rows. You can pass them down. There'll be staff. There's somebody in the back, she's waving. She'll be coming around to pick that up. Let's see. And then we also want to make sure that you sign in tonight so that we can get you information about the next meeting. At the end of the presentation, we'll take a very brief 5 to 10 minute break so we can go through the questions and get them in order. And then we'll get down to the business of responding to your questions. If they weren't answered during the presentation, we'll figure out a way to answer them for you sometime. We want to thank you for being engaged and coming tonight. Want to spend your evening learning about our region's water supply and for your interest in finding a solution to the challenges we face. I'm going to be giving some brief remarks about the local collaborative effort that's led us to this, but before that I want to introduce tonight's presenters. From the Lake Level Resolution Committee, Brian Desmet. You want to stand up? As the committee's chair, Brian will talk about how we got to where we are tonight, the citizen initiative that led to the options that have been identified and are being discussed tonight. Jim Groutman, Production Division Manager of St. Paul Regional Water Services, is joining us. He will provide details about the St. Paul Regional System, which could potentially be involved in supporting some of the options. Perry Jones is a hydrologist with the USGS. Perry will talk about the pumping management option that is closer to home and more local in nature. And from the Metropolitan Council, Ali El-Hassan, who manages the Water Supply Planning Department of the Council. He will focus on the next steps. Before we go further, I thought I'd give you a little brief history about how we got here. And I've been given very few minutes, so I'll be as brief as I can. As a legislator for the White Bear area, I had always been approached to do something about the lake. And so on February 11th of 2011, we convened a meeting of leaders of the communities around the lake, local, state, county, regional agencies and organizations, local business community, White Bear Homeowners Association, and others. We came together to listen to the USGS's Ground Surface Water Interaction Study proposal from the USGS. Subsequently, numerous entities entered into the partnership with the White Bear Lake Conservation District to fund the joint study. On February 21st of 2012, USGS presented preliminary results at the White Bear Lake Conservation District meeting. This led to the question, what are we going to do next? Looking at current and future concerns about the balance between the water supply and the lake level decline, we knew that action was needed. The goal is to work cooperatively together towards a regional, long-term, and sustainable solution. From this, an ad hoc group composed of representatives from the partnership started meeting to explore and research possible short and long-term solutions to maintaining a reasonable lake water levels on White Bear Lake. That research was shared with the White Bear Lake Conservation District's newly established Lake Level Resolution Committee last winter. The committee was made up of members of the Conservation District, communities, and technical help from agencies. The chair of that committee will be sharing more of that in his presentation tonight. We know that this isn't just a White Bear Lake area issue, but a regional and state issue that many of us work together as a team to create a bill in the Minnesota legislature to fund the phase 2 study of the USGS study and to fund a feasibility study of potential solutions for the water supply and lake level issues in the Northeast Metro. I'd like to thank the chief authors of the bills for their work to get them passed. Representative Peter Fisher, Senators Roger Chamberlain, and Senator Chuck Weger. And a big thank you to all those who helped to testify on behalf of the bill. We were successful in getting the funding as part of the legacy bill from the Clean Water Fund, which you will hear more about from Ali. And of course, we've taken every opportunity we can to spread the word to our U.S. delegation in Washington. We have not been silent. The outcomes of our efforts to date, I emphasize to date, are number one, funding. The successful funding of the phase 2 study and the feasibility analysis of options will help to move us forward. And Ali, I said before, will tell us more about that. The second is public outreach and educational events. All of these collaborative efforts led us to these forums to educate the public and aid in the establishment of more partnerships and greater conversation about being stewards of our natural resources. Also, communities are stepping up with their conservation efforts. The city of White Bear has had a challenge, and the White Bear Area Chamber of Commerce is starting their business conservation program. And by the way, I don't want to forget that the last night of Market Fest in White Bear on July 25th, there is an environmental fair, and we're going to be talking there too about this, or have a booth set up. So, in our next forum, we'll be focusing on conservation. And number three, our overall goal is to make informed regional decisions. What we learn will not only impact the local lakes, but the region and the state. We know that White Bear Lake is just an example of things that are happening in other parts of the state and the country. So, now my turn to pass this on. Next, we want to discuss the options that have been identified to address water supply issues and restoring the balance. Brian Desmet is here at this point, and I'll hand it off to you, Mike.
Good evening, and thank you, Carol. As Carol mentioned, my name is Brian DeSmit, and I'm with the Lake Level Resolution Committee, also the White Bear Lake Conservation District Board. And just to reiterate something that Carol said, thank you for being here. I appreciate that you take time out of your busy evening to come out and learn a little bit with us and help us to learn a little more. So, as Carol mentioned, I'm going to be talking about a report that the Lake Level Resolution Committee prepared and that the Conservation District approved that addressed or presented options for addressing the lake level issue. So as a bit of background, I think as we all know, White Bear Lake is at record low water levels. And the Conservation District is dedicated to finding solutions to that problem, or to that issue. And as part of that work, they developed the Lake Level Resolution Committee and assigned us the task of evaluating options for addressing the lake level. And then also, as Carol mentioned, the USGS report was initiated, and that report was just recently finalized, and Perry may be speaking a little bit more about that. So, to get to a general description of the options that we looked at, basically the options could fall into two categories. The first are options that augment the amount of water in White Bear Lake. So this would be addition of water to the lake to increase the water level. And the second are options that would reduce the use of the Prairie du Chien Jordan aquifer and thereby stabilize the lake level. The Prairie du Chien, just to set the stage in case you don't know, is an aquifer that starts about 20 miles north of the White Bear Lake area and extends down into Missouri. So the process that we went through basically was to educate ourselves as best we could. And as Carol mentioned, the ad hoc committee began this work well, quite a while before we did, and they had developed several options that they brought to us for us to look at. And so as and this is just to trip you up, okay, so there you go. And so in addition to hearing from the ad hoc committee, we also heard from the Department of Natural Resources, the St. Paul Regional Water Services, local industry, cities of Shoreview, White Bear Lake, White Bear Township, Hugo, Matamidi, the Metropolitan Council, the USGS, and then also the Turtle Lake Homeowners Association. Turtle Lake in Shoreview is also experiencing issues with their lake level, so we thought it was important to hear from them and their experience as well. So what we came up with is that several options needed to be implemented on a regional basis. The 5 communities that abut the lake could not fully address the issue of the lake level. It extends farther because of the reach of the aquifer. The implementation of several options is necessary because one option in and of itself won't be sufficient to solve the issue. And then finally, time is critical. The lake level's falling, and our opinion is that action needs to be taken immediately. So we looked at several options, and we identified some options that required further study. And these are options that need to be evaluated through a feasibility analysis to identify the cost of the option, how the option would be implemented, environmental impacts, these types of things. And the options that we identified for further study was to augment, the first option was augment White Bear Lake with surface water from the St. Paul Regional Water Services. And this would basically be a line, just generally speaking, from somewhere over near Sucker Lake over to White Bear Lake. And the details of that option, again, will be defined in a feasibility analysis. The second is to augment White Bear Lake with a local water discharge. There's an industry in White Bear Lake that utilizes groundwater in a non-contact cooling process, and this water could be reclaimed and routed to the lake. I guess what I would say about this option is that it's a very small volume of water, so it'd have small impact, but we felt it was worth giving it some additional look. The third one is to maximize the efficiency of well use, and this is something that Perry's going to be spending a little more time with tonight. It may be possible to adjust the use of the various wells around the lake to minimize the impact of the wells on the lake. And then the fourth one is to convert the Northeast Metro to a surface water source for drinking water. As I mentioned, well, I didn't mention, but I will, is that the majority of the communities in the Northeast Metro, in fact, almost all of them, utilize groundwater as their drinking water source. And I think by 2030, it's estimated that another 6 million gallons per day will be required. And so that may not be sustainable to keep using groundwater for drinking water supply. And so we felt it was important to at least initiate the study of looking at a surface water supply as the drinking water source. And then we also looked for options that could be immediately implemented and try to get some impact as quick as we can. And unfortunately, I guess, in my opinion, we were only able to come up with two. And one of those is to utilize existing Mount Simon Hinckley wells in the area during the high demand summer months. The Mount Simon Hinckley is a deeper aquifer, and it may be possible to utilize that during the high demand summer months and reduce the load on the Prairie du Chien Jordan aquifer. And then the second one is water conservation. And water conservation obviously is something that we can all do now, and kudos to the city of White Bear Lake for the work that they've done. And I think that the more that we talk about water conservation and get options out there for folks, I think people will be interested in increasing the level of water conservation. And in reality, what that means is just reducing their daily water use in some way. So what's happening now? The LLRC, the Lake Level Resolution Committee, is pursuing water conservation activities in the Northeast Metro. We're going to be having booths on various nights at Market Fest to hand out information. And we're also pleased to hear about the Chamber of Commerce program to reduce water use amongst the businesses. And then we're also talking to the school, a large water user, about conservation activities as well. The Conservation District is also talking with the city of White Bear Lake about using their Mount Simon Hinckley well during the summer. We've also requested that the Metropolitan Council include the options that we developed in our report in the feasibility analysis that they will be spearheading with the funding that's just recently been obtained through the legislature. We've also asked the Metropolitan Council to lead an effort to bring the communities in the Northeast Metro together to have conversations about both water conservation and as well as converting the Northeast Metro to a surface water source. These are both options that really need to be done on a regional basis, and so we think that the Met Council is best suited to bring those communities together to have that conversation. And then finally, the Conservation District has requested that the Department of Natural Resources designate a groundwater management area around White Bear Lake. And what this would do is it would allow the Conservation District to better manage the aquifer or groundwater in the area around White Bear Lake. So what can the public do? The first, as I mentioned, is to implement water conservation activities into your daily lives. And the City of White Bear Lake has already been promoting some of these items. We're going to be promoting them, as I mentioned, and and the Met Council as well has a conservation toolbox on their website that includes ideas for water conservation. Stay informed. So again, thank you for being here. This is a great opportunity to get up-to-date or current accurate information. And then finally, talk with your neighbors and spread accurate information because it's really important that people understand what's going on with the lake and how they can help to resolve the lake level issue. Thank you.
Great. We're really lucky to have Brian and Suzanne Donnell as co-chairs of our Lake Level Resolution Committee in the Conservation District. Next, Jim Groutman from the St. Paul Regional Water Services.
Thank you. I am Jim Groutman from St. Paul Regional Water, and I've been working there for 33 years, so I know quite a bit about what goes on with St. Paul Water. And I want to hopefully share with you tonight some things that maybe we can do to help out in the problem here. So who are we? We're a public water supplier. We are a quasi-department of the City of St. Paul. We are public employees. And the reason we're a quasi-department is that we're governed by a board of water commissioners. We don't report to the mayor of St. Paul, so sort of a quasi-department. Looking at our service area, and you can see that on the right, we supply the City of St. Paul, obviously, but we also supply 5 retail customers: Falcon Heights, Lauderdale, Maplewood, West St. Paul, and Medota Heights. Those are all what we call retail customers. That means we supply them water and we maintain their distribution system. So we fix main breaks, we fix their valves, their hydrants, any problems on their system. In addition to that, we have wholesale customers. Roseville, Arden Hills, and Little Canada are wholesale customers of ours. And we supply them water only. We do not maintain their distribution system. We also serve some smaller customers there at Lilydale, Sunfish Lake, and Mendota. We've got 94,000 total accounts, 90,000 of which are domestic, 4,000 are commercial. Again, population served about 420,000 people. Our average day in 2012, we pumped just short of 45 million gallons of water into our system. So we're a pretty big supplier. We supply most of the East Metro with water. Our maximum day was 77.2 million gallons. And our source, which we're going to be talking more about, is the lake system, which we augment with water from the Mississippi River. So I believe our system is really pretty sustainable. We get 90% plus of our water from surface water, which I believe is more sustainable than what the groundwater is here. Our treatment plant is what we call a conventional lime softening treatment plant. And that facility was built originally in 1921, and there have been a lot of upgrades to it. The last major expansion in 1958, but we continue to improve it even today. We've got projects that are going on. A look at our supply system. So the main, I don't know if that's going to work. Tough to see. The main part of our system is the lake system, kind of right in the middle. If you look at Charlie Lake, Pleasant Lake, Sucker, and Vadnais, that's the chain of lakes that we use. And we augment that with water from the Mississippi River Station. We have 2 60-inch conduits that run along County Road I and pump water into Charlie Lake. So, as I said, the majority of our water is from the river, and we also get water from the watershed, so that all counts as surface water. In addition to that, we do have deep wells into the Prairie du Chien. along the two 90-inch conduits that run from Vadnais Lake down to our treatment plant. We've got 10 wells there that can give us an average of 45 million gallons a day. On this map also you see there's two pump stations listed, Shoreview and North Oaks. Both of those cities are using our raw water now to augment their lake. Shoreview has augmented Snail Lake. They brought that back from about 4 feet down up to its normal operating level in the last few years. And North Oaks has brought Gilfillan back to its normal level within the last 2 years. So augmentation is already being done in those two lakes. Where we cross from Pleasant Lake to Sucker Lake there on Highway 96 to White Bear Lake is a distance of 4 miles. That's relatively close, I think, to get a surface water supply into something like White Bear Lake. We bring it 8.5 miles from the river, so we've done a lot of the work already. The things to the northeast there, Centerville, Peltier, Otter, those are old sources for us. We haven't used any of that water since 1988, and we don't plan to use it now. The water is not quality that we'd like to have, and there's also not a whole lot that's available there, so we don't really plan on using that system. The water from Vadnais Lake runs down on the bottom part of the map there. You see it runs through two 90-inch conduits down to our treatment plant at McCarran's. We have one treatment plant for our entire system, so all of the water that we have runs through those conduits and down to our treatment plant. This is just a quick map of the conduits that run from Vadnais to McCarran's, and this shows our well locations. All of our wells are along those conduits and drop into the conduits, so that well water mixes with the water from the lake and comes down, and it's all run through our treatment process. Let's look at our pumping station on the river in Fridley. This I just kind of like to put in here because I think it's kind of a cool photo, but these guys flew over our lake and were good enough to send us pictures. I'm not a military guy. These are F-25s or B-25s, I don't know. But the neat thing is right between the tailpipes down there on the bottom of the picture, you can see our intake on Lake Vadnais. And we have two intakes there. The other one's kind of hidden by trees, but they're right there. And you also can see the difference in quality between the east arm of Vadnais on the left and the west arm, which is on the right. The west arm is much shallower and much poorer quality. Those two lakes are not connected anymore. I think they were at one time, but they are separated, and all of our water comes from that east side of Vadnais Lake. As far as our capacities, Fridley, we're able to pump 80 million gallons a day from our Fridley station. Our appropriation permit, that's a whole different thing. We are allowed to take up to 20 billion gallons a year from Fridley. If you do the math, 80 million gallons a day, we can only pump there for 250 days and we're done. That's our 20 billion gallons. So we don't pump there all year. In fact, we don't reach our appropriation. We used 13 billion gallons last year, and so there's 7 billion gallons that we didn't use. As far as what we take from the river, between us and Minneapolis, we use about 1% of what's going down the Mississippi River. So there is a lot of available water there that we're not using. If we don't use it, it just goes downstream. The Fridley conduits, which get the water over to the lakes, we have 90 million gallons. There's two 60-inch conduits there. In our lakes, we store, between our operating levels, our high level and our low level, about 350 million gallons of water. And if you look at the high level of our lakes down to the intakes, we have about 3.56 billion gallons of water there. Vadnais conduits, two 90-inch conduits, capacity there is 160 million gallons a day. Our appropriation permit there is 30 billion gallons a year. And this is where it gets a little confusing. Our Vadnais appropriation is really our total appropriation. So we can get 30 from Vadnais, but that includes the 20 from the river, the 16.8 from the wells. We also have Otter and Centerville Lakes, which we have appropriations for that we don't use. But our total can't be more than 30 from all of our sources. From Vadnais, that's really all the water that we used, 16.4 billion gallons last year. That works out to 45 million gallons a day. And that means we have an excess that we didn't use, 13.54 billion gallons of water. The wells, we have a capacity of 45 million gallons a day and an appropriation of 16.8 billion gallons a year. We only used 1.4 billion gallons last year. We really only use these for temperature modification for our water. The water gets really cold in the winter, and we get a lot of main breaks. It gets really warm in the summer, and we get something called nitrification, which is a water quality problem. So we use the water to cool down the water in our system. And we don't really use all that much for our system, 1.4 billion. That's less than 10% of the water that we use. Again, a lot of excess capacity there that we don't have. So I guess the point I'm making here is we've got a lot of capacity in our raw water system that is available, that can be used. Let's look at our treatment plant at McCarran's, basically Rice and Larpenter. And the plant basically is the part in the background. The part in the foreground is some of the newer buildings we've built recently. As far as finished water, again, we only have one treatment plant. Our maximum day that we could do is around 130 million gallons a day. The maximum sustained day, we could do 130 for one day, but we couldn't do it the day after that. We would start stacking up our waste product and we couldn't continue. We could sustain about 105 million gallons a day for an indefinite period. Our average day, as I mentioned last year, is about 45 million, which leaves an excess, in my opinion, this is completely my idea, but about 30 million gallons a day. Excess being our max sustained day minus our peak day. That would leave about 30 million. So we would have the capacity to supply other customers about 30 million gallons a day right now. We have that much extra capacity. And this maybe will give you a little reason why we have excess capacity. I picked this graph. This is the water that we pump out into our system. And started in 1960 for a reason. The suburbs came online on our system starting in 1960. And you see a pretty good increase there in the first part of that curve. We peaked out in 1988 with an average of 58 million gallons a day. And since then we've been dropping. Our drop since 1988 is about 25% in 25 years. So definitely, you know, we've done 58 million gallons a day before, and we're doing 45 now. I mean, it's really easy to see we could do 13 more. We've already done that. So we definitely have excess capacity on the treated side. We have a surface water supply, and we have a reputation that goes back some years of not having great tasting water. And with surface water, you get algae. With algae, you get taste and odor. And normally that's a musty kind of a taste or odor. However, we put in a granular activated carbon system in 2007, and it basically has eliminated our taste and odor issues. And we have some water over there in the orange bucket. Anybody that wants to try it out, I've had a bunch already. It's great. So this is a graph of our complaints. And these are taste and odor complaints only, not all complaints, but taste and odor complaints. On the left, you see we were in the hundreds per year. Those are the complaints that we recorded. And I can guarantee you we didn't record all the complaints that we got. So there were quite a few. We put in the filters in 2007, and we're down to about 15 complaints a year from 420,000 people, which is essentially no complaints for taste and odor. So we have had no issues with that since 2007. This really fades out on these screens. I apologize for this slide. So I'd invite you to go walk over to our display and really look at the real map is over there. This shows our service area and a little bit more in the area that we supply. And over the map in our display, you can see individual streets and water mains that are there and the area that we serve. Really what I'm trying to show here is our treatment plant is about 4 miles from White Bear Lake. We could get treated water to White Bear Lake fairly simply. And we also have treated water right now just across 694 from White Bear Lake. We are at County Road D and 61. We're at County Road D and White Bear Avenue. We're really just across 694 with a treated water source right now. So we do have water that is available, and if we can help out, we'd really like to do that. Thank you.
big thank you to Jim. Before we go any further, have people filled out their question cards so staff can pick them up? We need questions now. Okay, next we'd like to have Perry Jones from USGS come forward.
Thank you for having me here today. I'm just going to discuss one of the options we're talking about, and that's really optimizing the pumping conditions that may be occurring in the area to see if that'll help in reducing some of the impacts of pumping on water levels. And it's really just kind of achieving a balance between our pumping conditions and what we want to achieve as far as the water levels in the lakes. And so one thing we found that was significant in our study, the results, was that we found there was a strong connection between deeper aquifers and the connection with the White Bear Lake. And so this is one of the diagrams that was in our report. And what we found is that through some of our water quality studies and looking at water levels in the aquifer, we found that there was a mixture of water that was coming into some of the wells that were down gradient from White Bear Lake. And so if you look, this is diagram, so it's kind of a slice of the geology through the area. And on top is White Bear Lake. But below White Bear Lake, there's the Prairie du Chien and Jordan Aquifer. And those are two aquifers that are heavily pumped in the area. They're used by most of the municipalities for a water source. And what we found was that that water was leaving White Bear Lake and was mixing with groundwater in those deeper aquifers, and then kind of a mixture of the surface and the groundwater was being received by some of the down gradient wells. And so the question came, can we go through and actually look at minimizing the effects of some of the pumping that might have on the lake levels itself? And so we wanted to see if we could possibly looking at the groundwater pumping conditions and seeing if we could do a better job of managing it so that it would have less of an impact on the lake levels. And one thing we find is that when you have groundwater pumping in an aquifer, it will lower the groundwater levels to some extent. And the amount of that extent depends upon the geology or the mineral deposits, plus how much you're pumping from the aquifers. But if you do pump from the groundwater, it can have an effect on surface water features, particularly if you've got a connection like what we've seen at White Bear Lake. And so we wanted to see if we could change some of the conditions, and this is part of our next step in the process, is seeing if we could change the pumping conditions locally to see if we could still meet our water demands and our water requirements, but at the same time trying to reduce the impact on the lakes. And one thing we have in a lot of the communities in the Northeast metro areas, we have municipalities that have multiple wells that they use for water supplies. And this is just a hypothetical example, but let's say we have a community such as this where we have 5 wells around the lake. And the impacts of pumping on those wells will vary as far as what impact it may have on the lake levels. Wells that may be closer to the lake may have more of an impact, or wells that may be down gradient may have more of an impact. And so it comes down to saying is that we wanted to see if we could look at optimizing the pumping so that we could look at each of these scenarios and say, maybe if we pump from certain wells, it'll have less of an impact on the lake. And so we could try to meet the water demands by changing the way we're pumping from each of the 5 wells so that we meet the water demand, but at the same time have maybe less of an impact on the water supply, on the lake levels, excuse me. And so we can do that by using a process called optimization modeling. And so optimization modeling, when we look at optimization, we want to look at the definition of what optimization is. It's to make perfect or effective or as functional as possible a situation. And that's from Webster Dictionary I picked up. But what we want to do is look at we want to look at trying to incorporate or meet our management goals in models by looking at different variables and then putting in constraints on those variables so that then we can reduce the amount of the effect of various pumping conditions. And some of the variables we're looking at are obviously the pumping conditions. In this case, The constraints would be something where we want to meet a certain lake level or a certain amount of water leaving the lake to meet the demands, again, of the pumping conditions as well as meeting the desired lake levels or stream flow values. And so with the groundwater management, with USGS, we have a package, a modeling package we can use to look at these kind of scenarios. And what we first need to do is to come through and identify the water resources management problem that we're looking at. And obviously this is where we're looking at the lake levels and the pumping. And to first start off with the process, we have to we have to develop a groundwater flow model. And basically, it's basically developing what we think is really happening out there at this point, representing what the actual conditions are. And we can do that with a lot of the information we've already collected in the studies so far. And then what we need to do is work on what kind of optimization model or what kind of scenarios do we want to look at to try to achieve something. What are our goals? What lake levels do we want to have on White Bear Lake? What lake levels do we want to have in other lakes in the Northeast metro area? And so we can put those two models together and then actually run those scenarios to then come up with to link the groundwater flow model with these optimization scenarios, come up with solutions that may meet our water demands while keeping lake levels to desired levels. So the USGS has used this kind of package all across the nation. I list here just a few examples where it's been applied, and a lot of these cases are very similar to what we've seen at White Bear Lake, where places across the United States are looking at trying to meet their water demands, but at the same time trying to achieve some type of balance between their water resources and the pumping conditions. And so just a few examples, the Big River Basin in Rhode Island, they're doing some work. I'll talk a little bit more about that example. But Elkhorn River Basin, Nebraska, that has a dealing a lot with irrigation, trying to get enough water for their crops, but at the same time, trying to keep their base flows in the rivers so that it keeps their aquatic system healthy. And the last two examples actually have to do a lot with sustainability. And I don't know if you've heard that term lately, but it's been a lot of concern across Minnesota is how do we keep our aquifer sustainable? Do we have enough water for the future? And that's been applied in Arkansas as well as in Wisconsin in the Green Bay area. So this is a Big River example of Rhode Island. And what they were concerned about is again, it's water. They have a problem with where are they going to get enough water? The population is growing out there and they wanted to meet water demands. But at the same time, they wanted to keep base flow conditions or the stream flow going to a certain level in the streams. And so what they've done is there's basically 5 wells that they had proposed to put in and into the area to see if they can meet their water demands. But at the same time, if you see the blue triangles, those are 4 spots where they wanted to keep water levels at a certain level or stream flow at a certain value. So they ran a variety of scenarios to look at pumping conditions, and they basically found that on the average they could pump between 5 to 15 million gallons per day from the wells. And they've taken this information now, used that for their planning purposes to see then if they can meet those situations. Now, how can we apply it at White Bear Lake in Northeast Metro? If you look here, the yellow dots indicate the location where we already have currently municipal wells. And we'd also have to include commercial wells, even though they're not in here, but wells that, for most part, are taking water from the Prairie du Chien aquifer. So this is a possible scenario we might look at is determine the maximum amount of water, groundwater, we can withdraw from that Prairie du Chien, from these wells, within a certain constraints as far as water levels. Now this is something we'd have to decide on a community basis, understanding what's an acceptable water level for our lakes. What do we want to achieve? And so the variables we're looking at is the amount of water we're pumping. The lake levels is the constraints, what we're going to try to reach, what's our goal. So what would be the steps for applying this optimization goal? Well, we've already talked about the second phase, and one part of our second phase of our study is to develop a calibrated groundwater flow model. The Met Council currently has got the Metro model that covers most of the metro area. We would take that model and use our information to calibrate for the White Bear area and the Northeast metro area and develop a groundwater flow model. And that's a process that the USGS and Met Council work on. But the next step is to decide what kind of we want to do as far as optimization goes. As far as what kind of scenarios we want to look at. So we can make the hard decisions as to what the lake levels we'd like to have and then how we want to pump from the wells. And so that would be a USGS Met Council, and also would have to involve the DNR, and also would have to involve the municipalities, because it's not a simple equation that we can take water from all 5 wells or 6 wells from a community. There's constraints as to some wells maybe we can only use in certain parts of the city versus other parts of the city. And those considerations have to be taken into account, and obviously the municipalities will have that information and we can work with them. And then once we've decided what we want to do, we can then run and evaluate some of the results from these optimization scenarios to see what it's telling us and what may be the best type of pumping scenarios we want to actually apply in the area. And finally, I just wanted to make note that we do have the final report of our first phase of the study. We have copies over at our stand over here, but we also have one-page summaries, since if you don't want to look through the whole thing, that kind of summarizes our results. And it is also available at this website. If you don't want to type that, copy that down, all you have to do is you can Google it and type USGS Water White Bear Lake. You should find it. Thank you.
Thank you to Perry, and last but not least is Ali El-Hassan.
Thank you. Carol started talking about the history of the effort, the local effort, how we got here. Brian talked a little bit about where we are now, and we have the options ready. I would like to talk a little bit about how we're going to go forward about addressing some of these issues. Our approach to this issue in the Northeast is to inform, perform, and engage. And we are happy that you are having all of you engaged in solving this issue in the Northeast Metro. As Carol mentioned, that we have received funding through the Legacy Bill, through the Clean Water Fund, to do 2 parts of the studies that we have been planning to do over the last year. Some of that funding is dedicated to do the USGS study. $500,000 is available for that study. The goal of the USGS study, and I think Perry Jones talked a little bit about some of the different issues they're going to address into that study, but the main goal is to investigate groundwater and surface water interaction in the Northeast. So that funding is available to Perry Jones to start working, and USGS with Met Council collaboratively into addressing some of those issues. Another part of the funding from the Clean Water Fund is dedicated to metro area water supply reliability and sustainability. And the goal that for this funding is to determine the sustainable regional balance of surface water and groundwater use in the metro area. As we mentioned in my previous presentation, we have seen some of the graphs that we showed you. If you have been in this event, the first event, we have shown the graphs that show the change in the water use in the metro area and the transformation from using or relying mainly on surface water into more heavily on groundwater. So what part of our studies now is to look into what are the good balances, where are the opportunities where we can get some surface water so that we can rebalance our dependency on groundwater. We think that the funding that's available for the reliability and sustainability is the funding that will help us to progress the feasibility analysis of the different options that Brian talked about. As Brian mentioned at the end of his presentation, Met Council received a letter from the Conservation District asking us to include the options in a feasibility analysis. And that's what we are planning to do. And I think people sometimes they don't understand what's the meaning of the feasibility analysis. The feasibility analysis, we're going to take those options, we're going to look into how we're going to build those options. As Brian mentioned, there is a couple of options about augmentation. How we are going to build a system that augment the lakes or the White Bear Lake or other lakes in the area by taking water from Mississippi, by taking water from St. Paul system. Where are the lines for this, the pipelines are going to be laid, and what are the environmental impacts of those? How much the cost of building those, which is a very important question. I think everyone is asking the same question. And also, what will be the benefit to the lake and evaluation of the impact on the lake to see what's the benefit of each one of those options. Another thing that will be included in the feasibility analysis is to determine the source or the potential source of funding for some of those options. Where can local stakeholders, if they want to fund some of these options, where can they find the available sources that's out there that can be used to build those systems? So the results of this analysis, of the feasibility analysis of those different options, will provide a guidance in decision-making for the stakeholders. The local stakeholders will have enough information so that they can pursue the option A versus option B, or both of them at the same time. But it will give more information than what we have right now on how we are going to do this in the future. I think the most important question I think everyone is going to ask us today is, when can we expect some results? And part of the bill, the legacy bill for the funding for the reliability analysis indicates that we have to report back to the legislature by January 15th, 2014, which is next year in 6 months from now. So that means we have to start working as soon as possible. And for us in the Met Council, we rolled our sleeves and we started working in the last, since we heard that we are receiving the funding, we're starting putting together all the procurement issues, and we are putting a procurement solicitation for consultancy to help us with doing this work. So please check our website from time to time to see what we are doing, and we're going to put our progress on that on the website. So we are planning that at this point, that interim report that we're going to provide to the legislature next year, we are planning to have more reliable results about the options than we have today. We are trying to put a lot of information that can make progress of these options much easier, or can be seen in this report in January. As I mentioned, this study is going to be progressing into next year, hopefully, but we are targeting January 15th for kind of a draft report that can be used for progressing the options in the Northeast Metro. I would like to leave you with a couple of messages. Last time, the ending of my presentation was the picture of the 2030, which was not a pretty picture. That I didn't want to leave you with that, but anyway, that's the end of my presentation. Now, I would like to confirm that in the Met Council, we share the urgency of this issue with the community. We have been involved with the community for the last year. As I mentioned, our approach to this project is to inform, and that's why we are having these forums. We did 2, and we are planning the 3rd one in July about conservation, so we're coming back again to you. would like to perform our work, and we promise that we'll work very hard into getting reliable results, hopefully by next year. And the last thing is we would like to engage you. We are very happy that you are engaged. We always need and value your support, and also we count on your energy to do our work. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of questions, very good questions. I tried in those 5 or 10 minutes to group them, and we'll see what we can do. If we don't get to your question, we'll try to respond to it in another way. The first one is more general in nature. Is tonight's PowerPoint presentation by all the speakers available online? Maybe that's a Met Council.
We can make it available online, so yes, that's okay.
Okay.
Definitely will have it.
We also have cable TV that is recording tonight, and so sooner or later it will be on a YouTube. So we'll have it on some of the city and conservation district and other websites so that you can look at it, the whole presentation, if you'd like to again.
Here's a question for Jim from the St. Paul Regional Water. Why did the water demand begin to decrease in St. Paul in the 1980s?
That's a good question, and I think there's a couple reasons. Number one, water conservation played a role. Water saving toilets, washing machines, shower heads, that all came in. Also, there's a little bit of a cultural shift in St. Paul. Sprinkling is not a big thing in St. Paul anymore. If you've driven through there aren't a whole lot of green lawns. So sprinkling went down. And maybe the final thing is we had some pretty big industries that moved along. During the 80s, Amhoist moved out. Ford Motor just left this last year, so we've had some of our bigger users that moved. But I think the biggest ones are really conservation and the lack of sprinkling.
Thank you. Another question, Jim. What is the cost of water per gallon from the city of St. Paul, wholesale and treated? Or however you define it. Yeah. A couple of different answers there. Wholesale, we sell at about 70% of our retail cost. And our retail cost for a customer is about $2.30 per 100 cubic feet, which is 750 gallons, roughly. And then there's also a fixed charge. Wholesale cost, if that's the, or wholesale, not wholesale, raw water cost, this is a little bit of a moving target, so I'm going to have an asterisk on this. But for North Oaks, we are billing them right around $100 per million gallons. That number will probably go up. We're going to invest in Pleasant Lake with an oxygenation system, and I believe that number will probably go up. But $100 per million for raw water. So it's hard to compare to your house bill, but thank you for taking a shot at that. Here's some questions for Brian, some other options that seem like good things to think about. Is infiltration of surface or treated wastewater being considered as an option to replenish the aquifer?
You know, that's an option that we talked about in the committee meetings, and the reality is that in order to infiltrate treated wastewater into the ground, you need a very large area. And it's unlikely that you could find a large enough area to do that in the Northeast metro area. And so that was an option that we did not evaluate or did not support for further evaluation.
Another question related to that, these are measures that are being taken in other parts of the country. What about the use of gray water systems as a conservation measure, that is, using non-potable water for irrigation, et cetera?
Yeah, great question. And my understanding is that in Minnesota, I don't believe that the plumbing code allows that. But I think the reason for that is that we've always felt that we had plentiful water. And I think what we're finding now is that as we continue to use more and more groundwater, that source is becoming much more valuable. And I think that the discussion is going to be advanced now for gray water lines, purple pipe systems, in order to reclaim some of that gray water for good, reasonable uses like lawn watering and toilet flushing, these types of uses.
And we'll be talking more about conservation, you guys will, in July, right, at this forum? So
That's true.
chance to talk about that. Here's one for Perry. Residential and private wells, what is their impact on groundwater and lake levels? Seems like there's a lot of us looking at municipalities and so forth, but not the private wells.
Oh, that's another good question. Really, that's one thing that isn't taken into account when the DNR has records. They typically just have records on high-capacity wells, and so the residential wells, there really isn't a records on pumping conditions. And if we look at White Bear Lake in particular, there's a lot of residential wells in Grant Township in that area. And those wells, they'll pump from different aquifers. Not all of them are pumping from the Prairie du Chien. Some of them are pumping from the St. Peter sandstone. Some are taking water from the glacial material. So it varies from where that water is taken into account. But all those need to be taken into account if we do some kind of analysis on our study.
Thanks, Perry. There's a whole set of questions related to the St. Paul Regional Water Supply for augmentation and for water supply, and maybe this is maybe a general answer, so a lot of questions around the cost of that system, the feasibility of bringing water across, the sizing of pipes, and all that. So,
Yeah, a lot of related questions there, and I didn't go into that a whole lot in the presentation, but the water that we have from the Mississippi and through the chain of lakes is listed as infested with the DNR. There are zebra mussels north of us in the Mississippi, so anything that we take through our system is listed as infested. So any water that would be taken from us for raw water would have to be screened. Shoreview does this, North Oaks does this, and so they built screening systems to screen that water, remove the zebra mussel. The veligers, which are the little babies, is really what you have to remove, and they're teeny. They're about, the screens are actually 20 micron screens. They're very small. So they have to be screened, and then they have to be backwashed. So, and to backwash them, you're going to remove those veligers are going to go back out to wherever you backwash it. So it's going to have to be going into a body of water that's infested also. So your facility has to be somewhere by an infested water body. That system, I believe, cost Shoreview in the neighborhood of $500,000 for their screening system. It does about 2,000 gallons a minute, which is about 3 million gallons a day. North Oaks, I believe, has half that size system, so about 1,000 gallons a minute. To bring that to White Bear Lake is about a 4-mile shot if you go straight down Highway 96. To me, it's feasible. To do 3 million gallons a day, that's going to take you a long time with how much water you're short. So it may take a number of those screening systems. As far as a pipeline size, say a 16-inch is somewhat reasonable to get across there, and you can probably do in the neighborhood of 4 or 5 million gallons a day through that 16-inch main. So there are some options there.
I just want to add to Jim's answer. There is a lot of questions that even among us we are asking ourselves how much it will cost, what kind of pipeline, where we're going to put the pipe, and we are planning to answer a lot of those questions by the end of the feasibility analysis. So the next step is going to provide a lot of those answers for those questions that we are asking right now, especially when it's related to how we are going to operate the system and how much it will cost to build those systems. Those are the questions that we are trying to answer through the feasibility analysis.
thank you. Question generally about, is augmentation of White Bear Lake a reasonable, realistic approach, and how much water would we need to bring the lake level up?
Well, I think, again, it's achieving the balance. To figure out how much water we're actually going to need to bring the lake level up, you have to look at how much water. It's not just the lake itself you have to fill up. It's the aquifer around the lake. And so Those are things we'd have to look at in our analysis, and those are components you can look at when we develop a calibrated groundwater flow model. We can look at those volumes and see how much it's going to take to actually build up the water levels to something that we want to achieve.
An assessment of the ecological impact of the different options.
Yes, we are going to include environmental impact of those different options on the, on the different sources. If we are going to get water from Mississippi, what will be the impact on that? And this is part of the feasibility analysis.
Okay, another question for you has to do with growth in the metro, population growth specifically. Please address the status of growth in the East Metro, future development, and how the substantial added density of residential and commercial buildings will impact water usage, all from the same aquifer.
The growth estimates for the Northeast Metro by 2030 is expecting the area to grow by additional 60,000 people. This growth is going to put more demand on our water supplies, and it's going to increase the impact on the aquifers if we continue business as usual. And those numbers are available in our websites. It can give you a good estimate of how much growth you expect for each one of those individual communities. I'll give you the general number of 60,000 people moving to the Northeast. And so with 60,000 people, you expect more water use is going to be in the Northeast. I don't remember on the top of my head the exact amount of increased water demand, but definitely I will be very happy to share that information in the future.
And they had a specific concern with Lake Elmo and those, but I don't know if those are considered part of the Northeast Metro, but the same numbers would be available for those communities.
Sure. We have the numbers for growth estimates by 2030 for all the communities in the metro area.
Perry, what is your timetable for the study to go into action?
Well, we're looking at getting started this fall and getting started with our analysis. And again, this will be a Northeast metro area. And so we're hoping to look at all the lakes and see what factors may be controlling lake levels, in particular ones that are declining. At the same time, we'll be working directly with Met Council to get started with calibrating the groundwater flow model, and also looking at coming up with seepage rates. Because again, it's determining what the lake water balance is. And so in White Bear Lake, we want to see, we know that there's water getting down into these deeper aquifers, but we don't know where and how much and how quickly it's going in. And so that's a factor that we want to do. We want to do some analysis of that, and we'll be starting with that probably this fall, and getting through putting in some of our testing during the winter as well as next summer.
Thank you. This is related, I guess. Are other lakes likely to run into trouble as well? Would augmentation from St. Paul Regional Water set a precedence that could not be sustained with other lake levels in decline? It's kind of hard to know exactly. So basically, if we used augmentation from St. Paul City Regional Water for one lake, and then there were two, and then there were three, is that a sustainable precedence to set? Maybe that's not one we can answer tonight.
I can say, and I think I mentioned, we use about 1% of the water that's going down the Mississippi River right now. So definitely there is water available in the Mississippi. The problem is getting it to where you need it. And we bring it across right now on County Road I, and we bring it down to Lake Vadnais. So it gets over onto this side of the metro. So we can get it fairly easily to some lakes in this area, but that becomes more of the difficulty is getting it to the lake. And we do have capacity there, but it really depends on how much you're talking about eventually.
Good, thank you. We only have a few more here. I don't know how much time is left. I can't see a clock. But okay. This one relates to raising Well, I'll read the question. Have you considered raising wholesale and retail treated water prices to residential and business customers to improve their focus on water conservation? No, I think that's to Ali.
Provide that one. It's Jim.
I can just say that this year, I know that there was an effort to change the rates up at the Capitol, and it didn't prevail, so there wasn't the desire this year.
I think it's already done in cities. A lot of cities has done to a scaled rating, usage rating, so.
Just to clarify that, we don't set rates, we don't provide water. So we are not involved in the rate business. I can see it in so many of the cities around the metro area. Woodbury is a good example. They showed that they have achieved great conservation last year by increasing the rates for the residents. And you can see it clearly in your water bill if you live in Woodbury and you use more water. I live in Woodbury, and so you can see over years that the rate that they charge you for your water is increasing. Other cities, they have developed a similar kind of a rate system. After a certain level of usage, your bill is going to increase by a certain amount. I think cities in the western part of the metro, they have some experience of setting those rates. I think Eden-Berry is one of them. They have a rate system that have been in place for a long time now. I'm not sure if we have any documented studies of the impact of using a rate system in the water use in the metro area. Maybe we have that, but we didn't have yet someone to document that so that people can benefit from the experience that we have. And that might be one of the areas that we want to look into, see some of those cities who implemented the rate structure system in their water distribution and see how improvement or how much the water they conserved over the years.
I think that covers most of the questions.